What does it take to tell the story of a community honestly, consistently, and with care? In an age of viral headlines and fast takes, local journalism often flies under the radar. But for those of us living in small towns or rural communities, we know local stories are not small stories. They are the ones that shape our daily lives. Today on Lead with Storytelling, we're shining a light on the power of community reporting with someone who knows this better than most. Erica Butler is a journalist and radio reporter based in Sackville, New Brunswick, where she co-produces the CHMA report every weekday on CHMA 106.9 FM. With 2 decades of experience as a freelance reporter in Halifax, covering city politics, the environment, and transportation, Erica has built a career rooted in curiosity, care, and accountability. She believes that access to reliable and independent local reporting isn't a luxury. It's a fundamental ingredient in building a fair, resilient, and joyful community. And that belief shows up in her work every single day. In this episode, we talk about what it means to report in a small town, how journalists build trust with communities they serve, and why the stories closest to home are often the ones with the most impact. Let's dive in.
There you go.
All right, we're live. Okay. Today on Lead with Storytelling, I have the pleasure of hosting Erica Butler. She is a stellar reporter and local journalism initiative reporter.
Yep.
In Sackville. And I am so glad to have her on to talk about local journalism, everything, storytelling, and community engagement. Thanks for coming on, Erica.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sochi.
So Erica and I were introduced through a mutual friend, Lorna Brown, and I couldn't be more grateful because it's always a thing of joy to connect with a fellow storyteller. I'm no journalist, but she is, and of course I would be learning a lot from her in this conversation. However, I think what connects us both is our drive for local stories, for local journalism. I would just maybe just call myself a media worker, and I at that point just try some way to maybe put my shoulder next to hers, but I couldn't, not even close. She's had many years of experience, but I'll let you introduce yourself in the way that you love to.
Sure, yeah. I'm a local reporter in Sackville, as you said. I've just been doing this job about 5 years now. And before that, I worked in Halifax as a freelance reporter for the Halifax Examiner and Metro and the Coast and a bunch of different publications. But I've been working for the community station here in Sackville, and I do daily radio news, very local stories. And I'm hired through the Local Journalism Initiative, which is a federal program that allows places like these local radio stations and papers to hire reporters just to do local reporting. So I feel lucky that I have this job. Yeah.
Well, I would guess that you feel lucky because it really aligns with something that kind of vibrates, lives and breathes in you, and you feel a whole lot. It feels a whole lot less like work than it is, your life's mission or your purpose. What drew you to this, to this role and to your work in the local journalism initiative?
Well, I've always been drawn to journalism because I like the idea of helping people to make sense of the world a little, and also helping people to sort of feel at home in the world. You get connection through hearing the stories of your community. And I think when, especially with something like local news, where, right now my focus is on, telling stories that have to do with sort of the local politics, but also, the local sports teams, what the high school kids are doing, what the seniors are doing. And it's sort of like, these are the people in your neighborhood. It's a way for people to really have their world become a bit bigger than just their bubble that they're in. And it enriches people's lives. So yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about that work. Every time I publish a story, that I'm like, even if, you know, one or two people made a connection through that, or saw a different perspective, got some information that really was important to their life, or any of those things, I feel like that's, you know, that kind of like at the end of the week, I'm like, good job.
That's real mighty. But I wonder, can you paint a picture? Because when I think of local communities, or when I think about small communities, in a manner of speaking, I think about Thornton Wilder's small town, and I think of all these very interesting characters that, you know, have their own lives, and they engage, they interact, they interweave. Can you paint a picture of, you know, what is the character of Sackville? I wonder. I imagine it's different from St. John. So a Sackville, is that how you would call them? It would be different or distinct from a St. John. Can you paint a picture?
Sure. Sackvillians, they come in. I mean, it's a small town, but it is a university town. So we, like, you know, Sackville has a few different sort of like maybe groups that come together to make the town. It's had this university, Mount Allison University, for 150 years or more, possibly getting close to 200 actually. And so it's always been a big part of the town. There was a big manufacturing base here. At one point in history, it was a shipbuilding center. The history of New Brunswick and the size of cities, we have a small village near here that's sort of part of our community, Dorchester. Dorchester was once bigger than Moncton in the history of things, but just the turns of history, Moncton kept growing and Dorchester did not, right? So yeah, it's a small town, but there's these different influences. We also have, in recent years, I think that there's a lot of sort of, you know, not young people, but like, you know, people in their 30s to 40s that have settled here and are, you know, maybe have creative careers. There is a fairly healthy creative scene in fine arts. We have Strutt's Gallery and the Owens Art Gallery, which are sort of two anchor institutions that kind of, I don't know, help foster that. Sappy Fest Music Festival and some other roots music festivals they're popping up around here. So yeah, I think it's a small community, but I think there's enough, and there's a big agricultural community around here too. So there's enough different walks of life that there's not always a natural mixing pot, if you know what I mean. There's not like one central place where literally everyone can, you know, hear or see each other. And I think that's probably what the local paper used to help with before it, you know, was shut down. It was sort of, over the years, it had been shrunk, you know, from when I went to university here in the early 90s, and there would have been a number of reporters and editors working for the paper. Now, when I came in 2020, there was one reporter still working for the paper, and it was, you know, really a lot of content from elsewhere, which is what happens when like big companies end up owning local papers, as you might know. They don't have a lot of local content. They have a little just to keep it local, but not a lot. So it eventually closed down right around the time I started working here. So I think that that was a big loss to the community, right? It helped all these different groups have a sense of a collective place, right? Where, you know, you might be an artist that, you know, works in a studio in a barn on your property. You might be a farmer, and you might be a philosophy professor at the university. But everyone is walking the same streets and that sort of thing. But maybe not really understanding each other's perspective and stories without some kind of outlet. So, I mean, I think that when I started working at the radio station here, CHMA, it helped fill in that what was lost when the paper disappeared, but we're still working at it. I think it's, as I say, that the paper had already shrunk down its influence so much that really we have a lot of room we could grow. I mean, I'm one reporter. We have two more part-time reporters working with me now. And I mean, the sky's the limit. There's so many stories we could be telling, so much work we could be doing. I know this. And yeah, but yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done there, I guess, even in a small town. And when I think about the rest of New Brunswick, I realize, like, you know, there's a lot of small towns, some even bigger than Sackville, with nothing. You know, no one's reporting on their local councils. No one's reporting on the big businesses there and what kind of projects they're planning and what they're doing. So there's a, you know, in addition to the sort of community networking and the sense of belonging that you can create with a local news outlet, there's also just the sort of the basic democratic purpose, right? There's a lot of towns that have, you know, democratically elected councils that, unless people have the time to go sit through all those meetings, they don't know what's going on with those councils, and their funds are being spent and on various initiatives, and they don't necessarily know what it's all about. So that, I feel, is also a really important role that, you know, we play here.
And I suppose, you know, because just a way to frame, you know, an understanding, the understanding of that response you just gave, you know, it speaks to the purpose of the LJI, the Local Journalism Initiative. But how did that start, and what is it doing for journalists, and how does it support the journalists and, you know, and the community at large?
Yeah, well, it's a project of the Canadian Heritage. I don't know if it will remain in there because, of course, everything changes when there's an election and things get reshuffled. But the Local Journalism Initiative essentially, you know, distributes money to hire reporters. So the idea is not a lot of admin off the top, but just get the money out to, you know, and it doesn't have to be, now CHMA is a nonprofit, right? We're a nonprofit society registered, and our home base is out of the university. So we have our studios there. But the LJI also, you know, gives money to hire reporters to, you know, Post Media, the Globe and Mail, all the big players and the little players. You'll see like small, I know the River Valley News in New Brunswick also has an LJI reporter. I know the Courier, CHCO TV, down your way, like St. Andrews area, they have some LJI funding to hire reporters. So people are using it to just beef up their newsrooms. You know, in our case, it sort of created a newsroom. In a lot of other cases, they're just adding to their newsroom to just expand their capability. And the money gets distributed through these organizations. There's News Media Canada, the Canadian Community Radio Fund of Canada, and Cactus, which is the community TV fund. And they are the ones responsible for saying, okay, who has a news desert, who has a need for this, and where will we send this money, and sort of making and keeping tabs on it, making sure that the people are actually doing reporting and that sort of thing. So the federal government has the pot of money, they farm it out to these organizations that then are the distribution mechanism. So that's where it came from. And hundreds and hundreds of reporters are working with this money across the country. Like, I'm just going to throw out a number. Like, I think I've heard in the 400s. So yeah, it's working.
Yeah, that's marvelous news. I mean, especially because I give a first account of how I would say local journalism is dying in St. John. We've had over the last 3 years, more or less, a death of local journalism, or less efforts towards or less proactive efforts towards the sustenance of local journalism in the area in St. John. We've seen, just like you mentioned, big organizations swallowing up little presses or little organizations, media organization, newsrooms being shrunk, and therefore you're having fewer reportage on local news. And of course, it's also impacted one project that has been dear to me and to my community, which was the seizure of funding for the Around the Block publication, a print publication, which was free and which provided a lot of closure, relatability, connection, in the community. A lot of people connected with initiatives, positive stories, stories of impact across the community through that platform. And unfortunately, taking it away did not, without providing some stopgap or even a replacement, I think was a disservice. And so I can relate with the challenges that of course is being experienced in other areas, and also rooting for any initiative that seeks to provide some succor or solution to that problem. What is one impact story that you've shared as that you've seen have such I won't say visceral, because that might just be a little bit over dramatic, but that you think has been most influential, impactful to you or into the community?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good one. I think that occasionally I've had people say, thank you. I really feel like, I was able to express myself, and, it wasn't getting, my view wasn't being shared in sort of the rumors circulating on social media necessarily. But I feel like, when the story was covered by CHMA, then I feel like I was heard. That's always nice. Sometimes, one of the things that happened earlier on, I can recall, our food bank had a flood, and within a very short time, we reported on that almost immediately. So they were sort of in a bit of an emergency situation where they had a lot of goods that they needed to move quickly, and they were in danger of not being able to serve people that week. And we put it, in our news. We shared the situation that the food bank had, and within, I think, hours of it being broadcast, people had reached out and the problem was solved. So, the storefronts or people who had, I think there's one actually downtown restaurant that had some vacant storefront that they were able to offer to the food bank temporarily until their place was rehabilitated. So I just think that's sort of like the simple little thing. That's really about information being shared and being free and circulating. Sometimes that sort of thing can happen on social media. So, I mean, I don't want to give ourselves too much credit there, because that's one thing that social media is good at, is just circulating information. I value that we have reliable information that we're sending out. So when we publish something, we've taken the time to vet it, make sure that it's accurate, check in with a few other people that might also know other things that could impact this story. And we've, given it some duty of care, and then we publish that information. So I think that there is something pretty satisfying about knowing that that's happening, because even when there's conflicts locally, some people are on social media, some people aren't. Some people don't have a voice that are involved, and I feel that we can hear people out. There's been issues that come before the town council, and people who will speak at council and try to get their point across, but I'm able to sit down with them, take some time, try to understand their perspective and represent it in a story as well as I can. And I think, that's some of the more valuable stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt moved even by hearing it, even in second or third account. But that's lovely. I'm sure one of the challenges you would face, or I can just imagine you would face, would be how to stay not necessarily authentic, but what challenges do you encounter in sharing, writing, or speaking about or telling the stories that are diverse? I mean, I'm sure Canada is becoming more diverse day by day, and Sackville is no exception. And therefore, you have a lot of diverse voices that you need to represent in your stories. How do you ensure that that diversity comes across fairly objectively in your stories?
I mean, I just try to have a bit of I try to cycle through. I mean, sometimes an issue that, and this is a thing that people have noticed about mainstream media or daily reporting, and it is one of the weaknesses of it, which is that you're just sort of dealing with what's happening day to day, and so your long view of your overall balance and you're just dealing, this is happening, I got to get a story out about this, you're just sort of and it's if you're publishing on a daily schedule, you need to keep doing that. Now, the reality is some stories might take days to put together. Some stories are very simple and can turn around instantly. So it can be challenging for reporters, and that's everyone from the Times and Transcript, CBC, down to people like me working really locally. It can be hard to make sure you've taken the time, but so I try to I have a bit of a sketch of different topics in life, from housing, poverty, environmental issues, local development and the local economy, local businesses. I'm trying to think now what else I do, but I mean, I have a bit of a checklist that I just try to keep track of and say, okay, have I, we maybe did a lot of housing stories, back in January, but it's been crickets ever since. So I need to pay attention and get back and follow up on things and make sure that I am addressing those stories. And I think it's probably the same thing with different voices and perspectives. I do want to make sure that it's not just always the same voices that make it on the radio. We need to hear from different people. Part of our purpose is to make sure people understand what kind of a community they live in and who are the people in it. So I think, I just like to always be getting someone new that hasn't been on the radio before, that hasn't been heard, and hope that we can bring them into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, trust is very important, and for people to trust you, in applying this approach, I'm very sure it's really helps in the long run to maintain an objective face in terms of the stories, perspectives that you're covering. But I also feel that, especially in the course of the project we're handling on this side of the community of the province, I found that building relationships goes a long way as well, to try and muster some support and trust as well. But I just want to ask, how do you go about building those relationships or maintaining relationships in your day-to-day coverage?
Slowly.
Painfully.
Yeah, painfully. Well, sometimes painfully, and sometimes people are very quick to embrace it, and they love the idea of having local news, and they want to, be part of it. Sometimes people are very suspicious, and it takes a while to build up trust, and I just have to, make sure I'm explaining myself and where I come from and what I'm doing, and what my rules are around what I'm doing. Yeah, it's slowly but surely. Yeah. Certainly, like, you can't, that's one of the challenges, right? Like, paper, if there was community news outlets that had been there for, 100 years and then they're gone. You can't just replace that overnight by just hanging out a shingle and saying, now I'm the paper in town. You have to, like, that name and that organization had built up a reputation, trustworthiness, just contacts, just basically, it really does come down to trust, where people say, okay, I trust you. I'm going to talk to you and tell you this part of the story. And I'm going to read you and trust you because you've earned my trust over time, and I can rely on you. And that's the whole raison d'etre. So, but it takes time. That's a reputation you're talking about. And so you can't just, you can't just snap your fingers and it's there. It takes time to build it. And that's just the reality. I don't know how you get around that. Do more, do as much as you can. Be visible, be at events. I used to cover a lot of public consultations in cities, and in Halifax in particular. And at one point, I remember hearing someone talk about, actually, in order to do public consultation well, instead of just hosting a meeting and inviting the public and making it a public meeting, people like these, planners, this was at a planning conference. That's right. It was at a planning conference where they were talking to planners and saying, if you want to do better public consultation, what you do is you go to other meetings. So if whatever group, it could be like the Refugee Coalition, it could be like the IODE chapter, the Rotary Club, the this or that, you go to those meetings, you meet those people, you form the relationships there, and you find out what is concerning them, not just wait to host your meeting and ask them, to fill out a form or something like that. So I guess that would apply to us, to our work, just as much as it applies to planners. Yeah.
Awesome. This speaks to one side of the challenge, or one type of challenge that journalists face. What are some of the other challenges that journalists are facing in the present dispensation? We're living in very interesting times right now. Relationship building is just one. Getting people to trust you. The trust is a big one, and they're all connected. I would say just the resources. Yeah. It's hard to build trust when you basically are down to a skeletal workforce now. Okay. There used to be a lot more reporters doing this work, a lot more, and there are far fewer. And so how do you build a fulsome, like an outlet that gives people that sort of fulsome, trustworthy thing? Well, it's hard if you have, a third of the people that you should have doing the work. That's a challenge. I personally, just in my few decades doing this kind of work, reporting on local councils and things like that, I've noticed the swelling of the government communications bureaucracy versus the shrinking of the reporter workforce. And so one of my pet peeves as a journalist right now is the inability to get quick, easy, accurate information from any, government agent. You'd think, and the public can generally, if you can get through to a government worker, a public servant, you can get an answer to a question that you have. But if you're a member of the media, you can't. And I don't know that people realize this, but there has been an institutionalization of communications in the government, and there are now
communications professionals, and they're the only people that speak to media as a general rule. Now, that hasn't fully infiltrated the local level. Thank God. Thank God, like I can still, if there's a big project going on with the Public Works Department in Sackville, the guy who handles that and is in charge of that will still be able to talk to me and tell me exactly what's happening. I don't have to go through a communications middleman. But more and more, like any provincial government, both New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, reporters are not allowed to speak to the people who do the work, the public servants who actually do it. They're only allowed they will get statements that have been, probably over a painful number of emails internally, like carefully crafted, the most mundane, standard, I'm not talking about real controversial stuff. I'm talking about literally every question, like, who funds this program? Well, let me get back to you, and I often think I'd like to, do an RTI request on the number of emails that had to get sent just to answer my question because I'm a reporter. But if I had been a member of the public, my question could have been answered instantly. So I think that's a huge problem, and I don't want to overstate it. It's a bit of a pet peeve, actually. Yeah.
Well, be it as may, we still have a job to do. So
yes, yeah,
the stories do need to get out.
Yeah, and then the relationships you can't get. You have to build the relationships with the communications people too. So you can't forget them, no matter how frustrating they can be. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, relationships are foundational. That's the way I see it. When we started on this point, we started by we agreed that it can be painful because it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a long time to build trust, and trust is vital. It just has to happen. However long it takes to get there. Once you get there, the idea of trust is that it is predicated on your intention or the intentionality to be to show integrity, that you have integrity. You want people to believe that there are good intentions for sharing a perspective, or you can be trusted to hold that person's or the subject's best interest in sharing that story. And of course we can argue about what best intentions mean, even if it doesn't always paint you in the best light, depending on the kind of choices or judgments that were made in that scenario. But foundational relationships are just foundational. And thanks a lot for sharing that. Well, like I said, or like we've said, the job still needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And things are going digital, and you're in the audio space. You're sharing. How is this influencing the way you tell stories, being not an audio file?
Yeah.
Could we say audio file? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, what, an audio worker?
This is your space anyway, by the way.
Yeah. So no, it's interesting. We also have a web presence, and that's and even our broadcast. We broadcast. You can pick us up with just any radio in Sackville, which is nice because it's low tech and free. And if you have the electricity to power the radio, then you have access to the radio. The internet, as we know, for people in Canada is expensive, right? I think it costs me like almost $100 a month to have the internet at home. So that, we do distribute on the internet because it's, obviously most households have it. It's become this sort of basic utility. So we send out our news program. Some people get an email with a link that they can listen to it. Some people wait. We also publish web stories. So some people wait and get the email and they read the stories on our website. It's podcasted, like the daily news show that I produce. It could come into your whatever app you're using to listen to podcasts. We try to be as flexible as we can. And I think, that I think that you're smart to mention the sort of medium and the importance of it, because one of the challenges in the future will be like, okay, how will this medium change? And the internet itself is so different than it was when it started. Like when I was young, the internet was this like wild west of like possibilities. And now it's a corporatized, structured, Canadian news is banned on the internet, on Facebook. I can't share a story. Facebook is huge in Sackville. Lots of people use it. There's lots of groups that share information that way, but none of them can ever
Here in
post.
St. John.
Yeah. None of them can ever post a link to an actual, like a professionally written news story, because Meta has banned that. And that's a big problem. So when you have these privately run corporate platforms that everybody is now using, that's become basic. Well, you have a challenge then. So, I mean, I think the message like a little while ago, a few years ago was like, these newspapers and local news outlets should be getting on social media and like distributing what your work that way and to get it out there. But little did you realize that like, they were going to come back to bite you. And as soon as money was on the table in the discussion, as soon as the idea of maybe compensating the people who are producing the news was on the table for discussion, Meta just shut her down. And they apparently think that they can continue to make money without it. So, and I'm sure they've been doing fine in Canada. But yeah, so that's the challenge. You have to meet people where they are to get them the news, but you also have to be realistic, and you can't just like do all this work just so that Mark Zuckerberg gets rich, and then no reporters can draw a salary in your own hometown. You see the problem, and we haven't really cracked that problem, right? Which is one of the reasons that I've been working on this Local News Matters conference, right? Because I think that there are different like small organizations that are cracking the problem in their own way, and they're figuring out local ways to do it. And there's going to be there's going to be lots of experimentation with how people run local news and how they get it out into their communities. And I'm excited for that. And I think that we just need a healthy discussion around that, and sharing of information, and like, oh, what are you doing over there? And what are you doing over there? So we know what's possible. And that's going to speed it up for us, I think. Like when we look at transitioning to this new model, transitioning from, every town having its own independent local paper, to them all being bought up by big companies and then being shrunk down to nothing and then being closed. Now, what do we do next? And we're still waiting to see the full rebirth of how news happens there. And so the places where it is happening now are really interesting to me. That's why I'm excited, to talk to so many of the people who are doing stuff in news right now, and find out hear their thoughts and their theories and their advice on, how we turn this thing around,
That's exciting news. And thanks for that, because, at the time of this recording, we're like a week away from Local News Matters happening on June 14th at Allison University. And I'm looking forward to being there as well, to meet you and meet every other participants who is in this space with this common concern and challenge, and, able to rub minds on how to navigate these challenges, the realities. A lot of people are really doing a lot, very interesting things. Seeing the lineup of panelists as well, and their work in this area, their suggestions, recommendations, as showcased and documented, really make for a lot of, gives you hope, more or less, that we've not given up. We've not given up, that local news does matter. So I'm looking forward to being there. And is there anything else about the conference you want to share that people can look forward to? Because I know that even after post-event, we'll have a lot of the fallouts, the takeaways also still documented, but for anyone who will be looking into this event, looking to participate, whether or not on short notice, can also get some feelers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that, with this event, we're really hoping to reach kind of two groups of people: the people who are working in media and local news already, or who have been recently, and then people who have realized that their communities need local news and are willing to, possibly put some effort into making sure that that can happen, like community leaders and journalists. And I'm happy to say that we have people coming from news outlets, and we have people coming from local councils. We reached out to some of the foundations around. I know we have different people coming from fundraising groups. So I think that there's going to be this, this is two different groups of people. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they're all in the same room and what they understand together. We're going to kind of try to answer three questions. What do communities need from local reporting? What's happening now? What are the outlets? What are they doing? What's the current state of affairs? And what tools and resources are out there, or what needs to be out there? What tools and resources really are there that can help sustain the operations that are still running now? How can we make them more sustainable? And how can we give birth to new ones, like what you're doing in St. John, right? How can we help support that? And then we're going to finish with a workshop. We have a facilitator who's going to, with the idea being like, let's actually walk away from this day, not just having had these great conversations, but let's walk away from this day with some ideas for actions. Let's try to make sure we actually boil it down to a list of like, well, maybe me, that other guy, and that person over there are going to get together and talk about, like, do we need a media foundation in New Brunswick? Do we need some kind of, philanthropic organization that's going to help seed and fund local news initiatives? Do we need just like an advocacy group, or do we need, I kind of have my own little list, but I don't want to I really want to be surprised, and I don't know what people are going to come up with actually. So I don't want to give my sort of version of what I think people might come up with, because I'm waiting to find out. I'm going to have a lot of faith in this group of people. We've got 12 panelists. We've got a keynote speaker, April Lindgren, who is from the local news data project.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's awesome. And she's been tracking this from the beginning.
Yeah.
She's been tracking the loss of community papers and community news outlets, not always papers. And then, but she's also been tracking the rebirth, right? Like the new things that are popping up. And so she's got this, she knows what's been lost, but she also has kind of a hopeful side to her. Like she's a hopeful person, I think. You won't walk away depressed after April Lindgren's keynote, but you will have this realistic picture of local news has taken a beating, and it needs work. So you will have that. And this is I think this is kind of my first step in saying, okay, I need to do some work on this, beyond just, being a reporter, like getting paid via a federal grant. This is my way of saying, okay, I know that we need some TLC, we need some energy, we need good minds thinking about how to solve this problem. And so this is the idea of Local News Matters. This symposium is to bring all these people in, and let's hope that something comes of it. I think it will. How can it not? Right?
I believe it will. I mean, magic happens when you put the right kind of people in the room. 2, 3, 4, when minds meld, it's combustion. Recipes for combustion. I mean, something is going to, because you're going to be facilitating collaborations, two people meeting, and I never saw it that way, and you never know what happens after that. I had this interesting conversation. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I sometimes insert these anecdotes in my podcast where my kids so we're looking at the Spider-Verse and talking about Spider-Man and how there are different Spider-Men, and the fallout of that topic was that, Daddy, why do we have so many Spider-Man? And I was like, because they're from different universes.
Yeah.
So why do we have, so they know there are different universes. How do those universes come about? And then, they had these ideas about machines that create the universes. And I was like, no, the universes are created by the choices. So in one universe, Uncle Ben dies, and that creates a Peter Parker. Peter Parker then makes a choice, so something happens, and then another thing happens because of that. And in another universe, it wasn't Uncle Ben who dies, it was Peter Parker who dies and then creates a Gwen. What I was getting to and why that came to mind was, you never know the ripple effect of putting two random minds with a common interest in a room. Mm-hmm. You are creating a universe where these solutions, incredible ideas, incredible solutions, incredible innovations are going to happen. And, we can't thank you enough, you and April, for all the work you're doing in, putting this event together. And I'm definitely going to be there. I'm,
great.
doing a lot of cardio for the long trip to Sackville. And I'll pack up enough chips, to get me through the road trip.
Yeah.
On the lighter note, what's a day in the life of a reporter, and in CHM like?
CHMA. So, okay, day in the life. Let me see. I get up pretty early, get my kids' lunch ready, and then I sit down and I finally put together the show that I worked on the day before. It has to be ready for 8 a.m. It goes to air at 8 a.m. And so I usually, I have about an hour to do any finishing touches, maybe add another little news brief or two if something's happened overnight that people should know about. And yeah, I record it. I have a home studio. I mean, I'm sitting at it right now. It's in my dining room. And I record that. And then, then the next day, or the day starts and you start getting ready for the next day. Interviews, sometimes, ideally I get to go out and meet people where they are and do interviews there. But occasionally I'm relegated to the phone and, go out and find out what's going on, take some photos, talk to people, come back and start editing away and putting together a story. A lot of emails, too many emails. Putting together a feature. We also, once a week, myself and the other reporters at CHMA, we get together to talk about story ideas and what each of us is going to cover. So we have a bit of a cohesive plan, and that's basically day in the life. And then a lot of time on the internet as well, because I have to, we publish web posts and we publish the audio. There's lots of little finicky things like formatting and export, like different formats and images and all that kind of stuff, which you would know running a podcast yourself. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. Keeps you inspired, keeps you interesting as well.
Yeah. My favorite thing is when someone says, yes, come on by, let's talk. Then I go, great. Mm-hmm. And I can, head out there. And especially if I get to meet people where they are in their home or their workplace or something. Yeah, that's very exciting.
Awesome. I have two last questions, still on the lighter note. What are you reading?
Oh my gosh. Right now I'm reading a little tiny book by a French economist. And what is his name? His name is going to escape me because I have, I have I'm in my mid 50s. So that's the kind of brain situation I have. Anyway, he is a French economist who has done a lot of work on inequality. And it's a little book talking about this idea of why capitalist economies always trend towards such high inequality, and what are the things in history that have pulled it back to more egalitarian things. So Yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Oh,
I could find it right now to tell you exactly what it is.
Oh yeah, sure. You can take your time. I'm sure you can hear me. It's closely related to this philosopher Noam Chomsky. He's been in the news recently for sharing his views about why capitalist democracy is a bad idea.
Interesting.
And I feel like the conclusions are not weirdly but very similar, which is you're going to have a very unbalanced scale in terms of representation, in terms of opportunity, in terms of fairness, in terms of objectivity, and of course the very counterintuitive impacts or effects on history and history making. I believe those are very two different things, and especially in this very weird time where we are seeing firsthand how it's almost like the Matrix, where people are actually remaking history in our very eyes. It's amazing. It's amazing. But that's an interesting one. But do share the title of that book when you have the chance. Are you reading it in French or in English?
In English.
In English.
Oh, let me go grab it.
All right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like here. Okay. It's called Nature, Culture, and Inequality. Thomas Piketty. That's his name. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. All right.
Anyway, yeah. He well, I mean, he is obviously, he's an economist, so there's lots of charts and numbers. But I did take some economics when I lived in Halifax at Dalhousie University, because as a journalist, I realized the economists are sort of, you often just take them at their word, and not having a background in that is tricky. It pays to have some, it pays to know how certain a statement something is versus not certain. Yeah,
just enough to have some foundational knowledge about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I have a first degree in economics. Can't say I ever used it. Can't say I ever used it, but
you probably use it all the time. That you just,
I
what I mean? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, that's true. I never thought of that. I probably do. You're right. And last but not least, what kind of podcasts do you listen to? Which ones are your favorites?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what have I been listening to lately? I've been occasionally I listen to audiobooks. And when it comes to podcasts, my family is a big comedy fan. So when we're doing family drives, it's often comedy. Personally, I really have someone had recommended an episode of what's his name? A New York Times opinion writer named this is really embarrassing because
no, it's not. Take your time.
Okay. Excuse me. I'll get it eventually.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my God. Well, no, I'll find it here in my actual podcast app. It's like if I'm mostly unable to recall a name on the spot if I need to.
Mm-hmm. Don't you love it when it happens?
Embarrassingly. Yeah, I know. Ezra Klein. So yeah, recently I got turned on to the Ezra Klein show as a podcast because and he's done a number of really great, some really great, sometimes it's academics or sometimes it's like writers. He had Jonathan Haidt of the Anxious Generation on there, and he had a woman who was so good, Gillian Tett, and she talked about, she kind of broke down the sort of her understanding of Trump politics right now, which is always anyone's guess. So it's very American. And I also listen to a lot of CBC. Like, I listen to CBC's Ideas. I like Front Burner. I like a lot of, I like my news stuff. The House, which is the weekly production, that sort of covers Ottawa politics. So yeah, those are my sort of go-tos. Yeah.
Awesome. Mine kind of varies. I do love learning from conversations with Tyler.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's very interesting. He's interesting because the way he navigates different subjects, he's interviewed, just like Ezra, a diverse range of guests, from academics, actors, singers, writers, philosophers, economists. And it's always been interesting, and it is always pleasantly surprising to find a way that he takes them on this journey through their own works and their thoughts, their ideas, in a way that, that shows himself very familiar with all kinds of subjects. And the question I have for Tyler is, how do you do it? Because I know you specialize in one area, but you seem to be very conversant, very knowledgeable of these varied subjects and areas of expertise, that you're able to make very engaging conversations regardless. And it's really interesting to learn how he's doing that, how he's engaging people, how he's keeping people interested, making them even more impressively, he's making them look more interesting. So yeah, that's I think that's one of my tops, and of course very, very many other things for different other reasons, other kinds of podcasts as well. But yeah, sure, I agree, and it's quite comforting to find that you also look out for the same thing in your own choices. Erica, you have a question for me?
Geez, well, I do. I mean, I guess I'm really curious to hear more about the project that you're working on, right? That's going to be launching imminently,
yes,
as far as we know.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
And yeah, what are your hopes and dreams for it? I mean, that's kind of a big one, isn't it? Sorry.
It is. I think it's something that the community really needs, and like I've off we talked about how this is also nerve-wracking for me, because I know how much of a big deal it is to take on a challenge like this, and you want to make sure that this works, because it hopefully will forge a path or clear a path for other initiatives to also sprout in the community in furtherance of the goal, which is to create an equitable and create ample opportunity for the community to share their stories. And earlier in the conversations we were just having, deliverability is a key issue with all the challenges that we face in the digital space. You still want to make sure that the grassroots get the news that they need. So for me, I think that paints a picture of what success would look like, which is first get this project off the ground, launch, make sure it happens, make sure the stories are on the site, make sure that the stories get told, and then begin to worry about in incrementals that the ethos or the ethos of the stories ring true, by diversity of voice, by accessibility. So in in incrementals again, making sure that you are plugging in all the right extensions that would help people to access or get those stories where they are. So it's not just going to live in one space, but has to live in many different spaces, because those are the touch points that the common man can get those stories or begin to feel the impact feel the impact and hear the perspectives of the stories as being told in different voices. So that's what I hope to achieve, and it all starts in this coming week with the launch, hopefully with stories that will paint a clear picture of exactly what we hope to achieve, or what's the work that has been going on in the back end, all the groundwork, all the conversations, and bringing everything to life, and then seeing it grow like a babe, day after day, week after week.
Yeah.
And with the right support from the village, and with the right, hopefully, saying the right things that get the right attention at the end of the day. And I think, in so many words, yeah. And I think that's really what I hope to see in this project. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important for me, or for us, to have this conference that you're hosting, and hearing and meeting with other storytellers and media workers and journalists, and hearing how they're navigating the challenges in the present reality would really help in furthering our goals in St. John and other small communities across New Brunswick.
Sounds amazing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Erica, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I know you're a very busy woman. You will be even more busy in the next week.
This week. Yeah, this is the crunch time. Yeah, thanks, Sochi.
But it's gonna make that blueberry muffin you're gonna have on Saturday, and that cold soda you're gonna have on Saturday even sweeter.
Yes, there you go.
When everything comes full circle. But thank you so much.
All right.
You've been very generous with your time and expertise, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, and take care. Thanks.
Thank you.